You read the study about how most people overestimate their driving ability, and your first thought was, yeah, but I actually am a good driver. That's it. That's the entire video. You just did the thing. You've watched someone ignore medical advice and thought they were an idiot, then skipped your own follow-up appointment because you know your body. Same brain, same trick, different costume. There's a specific glitch in how you process rules, warnings, and statistics, where every piece of evidence applies to the general population, but somehow roots around you personally, like you've got diplomatic immunity from probability. The reason you keep doing this isn't arrogance. It's something weirder than arrogance. And by the time we get to what it actually is, you'll have already done it 3 more times during this video. You're not as exempt as your nervous system has been telling you, and the funniest part is how you'll try to be the exception to that too. You read that most new businesses fail within 5 years, then opened a Depop store with 0 market research and thought, that statistic is about people who don't try hard enough. You didn't question the data. You just quietly exempted yourself from it, like your name was on some list the universe keeps. You watched a friend date someone with every red flag you'd identified out loud. The love bombing, the stories that didn't quite add up, the too fast, too deep energy. Then matched with someone nearly identical and told yourself, this is different because I'm going in with awareness. As if awareness were a force field and not just awareness. You know exactly how much sleep deprivation wrecks cognitive function. You've probably shared an article about it. You stayed up until 3 a.m. last night, and you're currently running on 4 hours thinking, I function fine on less. Your brain just stops reporting the damage accurately, which is the kind of irony that would be funny if it weren't operating your entire decision-making system right now. You heard that almost nobody successfully maintains weight loss through willpower alone, and your internal response was a quiet, confident, watch me, followed by the same cycle you've repeated 4 times. The speed limit is a suggestion. The return policy won't apply to your situation. The average timeline for recovery isn't your timeline because you heal faster. You don't say these things out loud, but your behavior says them constantly. Every single one of these moments has the same name, and it's not what you think. It's older and stranger than overconfidence. What's running underneath all of that is something Neil Weinstein identified in 1980 called unrealistic optimism, the stable, measurable tendency to believe negative outcomes are less likely to happen to you than to comparable others, even when you've got 0 evidence for the exception. Your brain isn't making an argument when it does this. It's skipping the argument entirely, more like a customs agent waving you through without checking your bags. The conclusion, this won't apply to me, arrives before any reasoning even starts. Weinstein's research showed something genuinely unsettling. The better someone understood a risk intellectually, the more confident they became that they'd personally avoid it. Knowledge didn't reduce the bias. It gave the bias a more sophisticated vocabulary. There's a second layer. Something Ellen Langer studied extensively called the illusion of control, the belief that your personal involvement in an outcome means you can influence things that are actually random or structural. You don't think dice will favor you, but you do think your choices exist in a special category that other people's choices don't. This stops being funny when you realize it's not a quirk. This is the architecture of how people exposed to real risk, financial, medical, relational, expose themselves willingly, eyes open, believing they were the careful ones. The psychology goes deeper than misjudging odds. It touches something about how you construct your identity, and that part is harder to hear. The reason you think you're the exception isn't confidence. It's that your brain literally cannot simulate a version of you that loses. The mechanism behind this is called self-serving attributional bias. You assign your successes to internal traits and your failures to external circumstances, which means your internal model of yourself has a spotless record that doesn't actually exist. You don't think rules don't apply to you because you're arrogant. You think they don't apply because your brain has quietly been running a highlight reel instead of an accurate documentary, and you've been using that reel as your resume. The person who texts their ex at 1 a.m. and the person who invests their savings into a sure thing are running identical software. The only difference is which domain their exemption fantasy lives in. You've never once thought, I am the kind of person statistics describe. And that sentence is, statistically, a near universal experience. which means the belief that you're unlike everyone else is the most common thing about you. The part that doesn't resolve neatly is what this protects you from, and why giving it up feels less like growth and more like grief. The pushback forming in your head right now sounds something like, okay, but sometimes people actually are the exception. Shouldn't I believe in myself? Isn't some optimism functional? That's fair, and it's partially right. Shelley Taylor's research on positive illusions showed that mildly inflated self-belief correlates with better mental health, motivation, and persistence. A small amount of this bias genuinely helps, but the objection collapses in one place. You're not using this bias to attempt hard things. You're using it to avoid adjusting your behavior after receiving perfectly clear information that adjusting would protect you. Those are different operations wearing the same outfit. Believing you can succeed at something difficult is optimism. Believing the consequences other people face won't reach you while doing nothing differently isn't optimism. It's a permission slip your brain wrote, and you co-signed without reading. You already know which category most of your exceptions fall into. You don't need me to sort them. You've probably been sorting them for the last 45 seconds. The question that actually matters isn't whether you're sometimes right. It's what this costs you during the long stretches when you're not, and what that pattern looks like from the outside. You're sitting at your kitchen table at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Your laptop is open to a spreadsheet you built yourself. Budget projections, timelines, maybe a little color coding because that makes it feel real. Someone who cares about you said last week gently that the plan seemed risky. You nodded. You said, "Yeah, I've thought about that." You had not thought about that. You'd thought about why it wouldn't apply. Inside your head, a very calm, very confident narrator is explaining that the reason most people fail at this is that they lack your specific combination of awareness and effort. As if awareness were a shield and effort were a cheat code. You're not being reckless. That's the strange part. You genuinely feel measured, considered, careful. Your heart rate is calm. Your plan has steps. You've never felt more rational in your life. That's exactly what makes this the most dangerous version of the pattern. It doesn't feel like a bias. It feels like clarity. It feels like being the one person in the room who actually sees things as they are. Somewhere in the next 6 months, this Tuesday night will become a story you tell with a self-deprecating laugh, and you'll say, "I should have known." But you did know. You just thought knowing was enough to make you immune. In the short term, this pattern looks like confidence. In the medium term, stubbornness. In the long term, it looks like someone who keeps designing better plans for the same mistakes. Over the years, the person running this bias doesn't become less competent. They become more articulate about why this time is different. The exemption evolves, the logic improves, the outcomes don't. Relationships accumulate a specific kind of damage. The other person learns that your willingness to hear a warning has no connection to your willingness to change course. They stop warning you. You interpret their silence as agreement. There's a loneliness specific to people who believe they're the exception. Eventually, the people around them stop arguing and start watching. That quiet isn't peace. It's distance. The financial version looks like someone who always has a reason. The next risk is smarter than the last. The health version, someone who plans to deal with it for 7 consecutive years. The emotional version, someone who keeps choosing intensity over stability and calling it depth. Each instance feels isolated to you, a one-time thing, a special circumstance. But from the outside, it's a pattern with a pulse, and this bias doesn't cost you the things you were afraid of losing. It costs you the things you didn't realize you were betting. What if the goal isn't to stop believing you're the exception? What if it's to notice the exact moment you start building your case and recognize that the speed of your certainty is the warning, not the reassurance? The people who navigate risk well aren't the ones who eliminated this bias. They're the ones who learn to feel it activate and treat it as information. The same way you'd notice your pulse rising before a bad decision and think, okay, something's happening here. You don't need to become someone who assumes the worst. You need to become someone who notices when your brain skips the part where it checks. The distinction between exemption and preparation is small and completely load-bearing. One says, this won't happen to me. The other says, this might, and here's what I'll do if it does. Same confidence. Entirely different architecture. The most human thing about you isn't that you think you're different. It's that you need to think you're different in order to keep going. And the bravest version of you is the one who keeps going anyway, after admitting you're not. Everyone you admire for being honest with themselves had to stop being their own exception first. That's not where their story ended. That's where it actually started. So tomorrow morning you'll hear a piece of advice, nod thoughtfully, and then do exactly what you were going to do anyway. But now you'll feel a tiny flicker of guilt about it, and that's my gift to you. If your brain just whispered, "I'll actually use this though, unlike most people," then congratulations. Subscribe, because you're going to need every video on this channel.